Very much, Pierre, for the introduction, and thank you very much to the organisers of bringing this excellent event together. It's great to be back in a business school, being an MBA in 1984, so before probably a few of you will be born. So anyway, what I'm going to do, as Pierre said, is give a bit of an overview of sort of trends and developments, and then I'm going to focus in on a few examples from business in terms of innovation and products, and then I'm going to end up with 2 sets of 10 lessons learned, one for sustainable innovators and one possibly for education, particularly focused on business education. So it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, so bear with me. Firstly, get the technology working. Let me do it that way. Excellent, thanks. Right, so we're living in a lot more globalized world, a lot more interconnected, information moving at the speed of light, global value chains, and within that supply chains, very complex networks, not just chains. And one thing that we can see is if we're looking at, you know, the broader sustainability aspects and then drilling down into issues to do with corporate responsibility, we're seeing not just those broad issues, but it's the ability to respond to the challenges. We have more things coming at us at speed. So your ability to respond and be flexible will be increasingly important. From a broader sustainability aspect, we can argue that we're facing a triple-pronged crisis, environmentally, socially, and economically. We're seeing in places like Spain, 50% unemployment of 80 to 25-year-olds, significant change in the education system in the UK, for example. We saw around about this time last year 950 protests in 52 countries around the global banking crisis. So we've got a lot of challenges going on the broader social and economic side, as well as the euro, etc., etc. But environmentally, you know, in the last 18 months, we've had the significant impact of natural disasters, earthquakes, you know, broader issues associated with climate change, not impacting purely on, you know, communities, etc., but disrupting global supply chains. Factories in Thailand underwater from floods. So again, going back to my 1984 MBA, we did not study in operations management, siting of factories and being aware of climate change, for example. And if you're not doing that, you may find significant risks into the future. So it's not just climate change and carbon issues, it's materials issues. We're seeing, particularly on a global level, increasing concern around the security of supply of raw materials, particularly what has been defined as the 14 critical metals. For example, rare earth metals, China controls 80 to 90% of these. If you don't get rare earth metals, you can't produce magnets, you can't produce electric vehicles. On another level, we're talking about the broader issues to do with closed-loop economies and how we recycle our resources much more effectively, reuse and remanufacture. So this is not just a carbon and climate change issue. We're also seeing, from a broader perspective, major policy drivers from the European Commission and member states, as well as increasing costs at an SME level. Also water. Water was touched on in some of the earlier presentations. Again, not just for drinking water and human health and life, but also, again, if you're a semiconductor manufacturer, you are sited in a place of drought, you can't get the water to produce your chips, for example. We're also, however, seeing a number of companies starting to really look at how they drive water reduction through their supply chains. And for example, Levi's identified a 96% reduction in water use in the finishing phase of their jeans, reducing environmental impact, reducing costs. They've then used that platform of information to create a brand called Waterless Jeans, or Water Less Than Jeans. So again, water is a critical issue. So I personally emphasize this is a much broader issue, and if you've got your radar out there and you're just purely focusing on carbon and climate change, you may well miss a number of key issues which will impact on your business into the future. So the world's much more interconnected, and these issues impact directly on business. This isn't just a classroom discussion, these are real business issues. So what we've had at Rio Plus 20, I was fortunate to be at Rio 1992, and I see some differences there. Rio Plus 20 significantly reaffirmed the importance of green growth and green economy. We've seen the World Economic Forum, United Nations, and others producing high-level think-type reports, and again, this was reaffirmed at Rio. Some of the differences between 1992 and 2000. We've got internet. When I was there, I got business cards. I had to send faxes and letters. The world is very flatter. It's much flatter. We have much more globalization. We have, particularly in the sustainability area, the retailers now getting much more actively engaged in the agenda. They weren't then. We also seeing, despite the recession, the media continuing to be interested and cover the issues. So again, that's different. When things dipped, the media dipped, but the media are still continuing to cover the issues. So there's a lot of issues around change, and at time of crisis, there is often opportunity. So people are starting to question, should we be doing things differently? Should we be measuring GNP in a different way? So this extent of change, how radical will it be? What we're seeing is also growing discussion around sustainable, or more specifically, eco-innovation. And the European Commission in December 2011 published an eco-innovation action plan to try and drive thinking throughout Europe. So innovation is key, and I'm going to focus on particularly innovation in the sense of products, services, and technologies, rather than processes. So again, innovation can be big and it can be small. What we see generally in terms of products and in terms of specifically eco-design, for example, we see incremental improvements, marginal increases in improvements in energy efficiency, often driven by legislative requirements, or getting a little bit better in terms of material usage. So it's either incremental innovation or redesign. But maybe what we're starting to need and see is opportunities for much more disruptive and radical innovation. But often it's very difficult to see those really disruptive innovations. And some of those particular disruptive innovations have occurred, the ones at least I have to mind are in the ICT and social networking space. And I'll come back to that just in a minute. That radical innovation can come through two dimensions. One is framework change. Can we change the framework? Can we, for example, as the Japanese did in 2001, pass a green purchasing law? I repeat that, a green purchasing law. The government passed a law which sent out a message to the Japanese suppliers to improve the environmental performance of their products, or else they wouldn't be bought by government. So it's sending a message, incentives out, so we can create the framework to drive that innovation. We're seeing in the UK, and I'm not sure about Ireland, but something called the Code for Sustainable Homes that's come in to provide a platform to try and drive net zero energy buildings, for example. But the way the legislation is being framed is very loose. The deadlines are changing. It gives no certainty to suppliers and innovators as well as investors to develop those technologies, because the goalpost is changing. So there's this call out for much more certainty from the policy framework to enable people to innovate. But particularly in that ICT and social networking space, that innovation has come from the ants, in my opinion. What do I mean by the ants? Well, I mean probably you guys, similar to you guys, in your, your university bedrooms or wherever, thinking about new ideas. Facebook, Twitter, etc., came from those sort of environments, and came from Silicon Valley, for example. And I used to just talk about, the importance of individual entrepreneurs with an idea. But then I read a really interesting paper which said it's not just the innovators, it's actually the networks they sit within. So it's the nest of networks. So if you've got a good idea in Silicon Valley for a clean tech product, you can go to find somebody to check that idea out. You can then go and be pointed towards an investor. You can then be pointed towards somebody with some technology or recruitment companies. So there's a nest of 10 to 15 key players to help you bring your idea to the market. Certainly in the UK, and I believe in Europe generally, we don't have these networks designed to enable us to take those ideas to market effectively in this space. It might be in biotechnology or other areas, but certainly not in the eco-innovation space. So how do we design those networks? And maybe an interesting example is to try and look at that within your Greenways project. So again, what might be the Google of sustainable innovation? It may be sitting there, but do we have the systems to bring that to market? Because a very simple quote I saw recently was, what is innovation about? Well, crudely, it's about taking good ideas, it's to enable good ideas to make cash. Often we focus on the good ideas and the R&D rather than the commercialized element of it. So how do we do this? And what we're starting to see, again, is new and emerging approaches in terms of the opening up the innovation process. Particularly in the sustainable or eco-innovation space. And we're seeing now major organizations starting to release their patents or license their patents of eco-innovative technologies. If they can't get an immediate benefit, let's release that IPR to kickstart new innovation. Nike, for example, is doing this around clothing products and footwear. IBM have started so-called eco-jams internally and then externally, as well as GE, looking at smart buildings or sustainable buildings and smart grids, for example. And then we have other interesting organizations. This is OnVU in the Netherlands, a foundation. Basically, they kickstart eco-innovative businesses, on average about 10 new businesses each year. Like everybody else in Europe, they're struggling to get money from the clearing banks. So they said, right, we're going to use a crowdfunding approach, open innovation, to source new money. And they raised 100,000 euros in 3 months from 300 investors who just wanted to invest in real new businesses. People who have got pissed off, no French people here, excuse my French. They got really annoyed with the clearing banks. And they want to attach, like our last presentation in the morning, a real company trying to do something. So again, very interesting things. And we've got Crowd Mission is a company that will just be launching in this space, an Impact Crowd. Two companies purely going to bring this technology, if you like, to the green space. We see other interesting new business models. This is Patagonia and eBay coming together, developing a platform to try and encourage people to send clothing products back to be repaired and resold, i.e. to divert products from landfill as long as they can. Sustainable dance floor, generating, just to wake you up if you're not asleep, generating energy from footfall. Company again sprung out of the OnVU Dynamo incubator, was there in the Olympics alongside a UK company called PaveGen, who's using similar piezoelectronic technology to generate energy from pavements. Interesting company, all under 30, took an idea from Loughborough University, got the fundings, made it happen, and it was there at the Olympics. Socket 2, developed out of Harvard, a group coming together using kinetic energy, kick the football around for 15 minutes and you get 3 hours of energy to power LED lights. It was a launch to the Football World Cup. I'd never heard about it. Did any of us hear about it? How do we get these good news stories out? Because these are real stories that could make a difference. But it's not just about the product and technology side, it's also about social innovation. And what we're starting to see is particularly the transition town movement, which is about 1,000 plus towns worldwide now, starting to re-envision what a low-carbon community might look like. And I think this is quite interesting in that people are starting to focus in, for some of the reasons in the previous presentation about teleworking and other issues, on their local communities. And I believe a lot of this has been facilitated or accelerated maybe by social networking technologies. I know when I came back to live in my town and I decided I want to join Friends of the Earth, it took me about 2 hours going through the library to find a dusty old folder with the name of somebody in it. But you can do this now like that. So things just move faster. You can connect with people in your interest area, you know, much quicker than, for example, in my generation. So again, what is going to be the impact of these social networking technologies? Only 8 years old, the oldest. You know, it's so early yet. Facebook's hit 1 billion users. They may not have their business model right, but it's, you know, that's, you know, massive. It's huge. So again, what we need is better demonstrations of these products and technologies for people to understand what they might look like the sustainable dance floor. It may not be the solution, but it's showing a different way of thinking. Better networks, I mean, better processes to take the ideas to market. So it's about thinking differently. And bringing back down into the product area is we need to be able to start to think about the life cycles of our products and how we reduce the environmental impact of those products. And within that, particularly look at the materials side, methodologies like the cradle-to-cradle approach, look at how we bring, say, materials from the ground through to textiles that go on the chairs, right through at end of life back into the ground. Or remanufacturing systems where you remanufacture and resell the products, for example. Xerox claim to get 7 lives out of one of their platforms by designing that system. The use of biomimicry, lessons learned from nature. What lessons can we learn from the waterproof property of a tomato skin in designing waterproof clothing? How do we get people working in different ways? Interface floor, one of the biggest contract carpet companies in the world have a commitment around sustainability, and they've used various methods to think through what sustainable products might be. Most interesting one recently has been they've identified that within materials, nylon is their biggest impact. They think, how can we produce carpets using recycled nylon? Where can we get the material? Fishing nets. So they've produced now the most, a very successful product that, you know, they've gone around the world getting fishing nets, and there's fishing nets in their products, real product, real work, just thinking differently. Again, big companies are now starting to manage this. They have it recognizing it's not just one product, but they're integrating this into their products, like J&J and others. Philips and Procter & Gamble, they have methodologies that they're incorporating into their management systems, because this isn't just an ad hoc product, this is what they're doing. Looking at how you reduce energy in your products, water, etc., etc. So, 2 sets of 10 lessons. So lessons, I run a conference called Sustainable Innovation that I've run for now, this will be the 17th year, over 2,000 delegates from 50 countries. What are some of the lessons from that for sustainable innovators? Well, it has to be business focused. It will take time to incorporate it in your organization. You need structures and systems, and you need incentives to hardwire it into the organization. Implementation is one of the biggest challenges. You need to be creative, do things in different ways. You need, and this came from the sustainability director of Philips Lighting, you need resilient change makers, people who can go out and take a punch and carry on, you know, driving these issues through. And a number of us who are working in that area recognize that challenge. You need to raise awareness. People can't be kept in the dark. You need to provide new ideas. You need to keep awareness. Put information up on the intranet site of the organization. Remind people. Open up to new ways of innovating. Encourage entrepreneurship, people to bring in entrepreneurial skills within the firm, keep them within the firm, or maybe let them develop their own businesses. But again, it may not be entirely comfortable for people who've spent 20 years setting up their business divisions. So again, there's a management to change issue here, but I believe there are opportunities. And then just in focusing in, I tried to get to 15 minutes, but it will be 20, I'm afraid. 10 lessons in terms of education, and particularly I'd say for business education. We have to recognize we're operating in a much more globalized world. Things have to now be, we have to look at things in a much more global dimension. We're selling globally, we've got supply chains globally. We have to improve the cultural awareness in our courses because we are likely to be dealing with other cultures in the world, particularly if we're operating globally. So we need to understand other cultures much more effectively, and not just corporate cultures, but other, human cultures. If we can't understand Chinese ideas, Indian, African, particularly Africa coming back up again, we're going to not implement things. This is one I added in here. I call it integrated science. I think there's, we face challenges of silo mentality in businesses and also in academia, but I think what business students need to be exposed to is an introduction to science. Talking to a biologist, using biology, in relation to biomimicry, for example. So how do we integrate in an interdisciplinary way? We need to learn to collaborate. We need to learn a co-development. How can we work with people in partnership, new business models, new ways of working? Something quite key within Leanne's thinking on her model. We need to be creative. We need not just to have great left brain analytical skills in terms of numbers and spreadsheets, but we need to be able to think differently and be able to question things. Think laterally. How are we incorporating that in our courses? Because we need to, if we're going to innovate, we need to think differently. The other area that I think is actually not dealt with, well in the business school research area is the organizational dimension of how we design in the implementation. For example, what I mean by that is an example from Boots, the retailer in the UK. They wanted to drive sustainability more effectively with their marketing department. So what did they do? They, in a company reorganization, they cited their marketing department right next to their sustainability department. So the guys had to chat over the coffee machine. So that's micromanagement issues. How do we get people talking? And we need much better ways of working cross-functionally. Arthur D. Little, the consultants, talk about hitting the green wall. You can push environmental or sustainability projects to a point, then you hit a wall. You have to be able to translate into the language of marketing, production, finance. What does it mean to us? What does it mean to our business function? And again, I think there needs to be, this much bigger integration between business and business schools. We need, for example, maybe some, guys from the business communities to join as visiting professors, to bring in the knowledge in the firms, because a lot of the firms are doing this, particularly the big players. So again, how can we blur the boundary there? And again, what I've learned, which was never taught to me in my MBA in 1984, but I've learned in life over the years, is our ability to judge risk, to accept risks, and understand our own risk threshold. The best thing to look on that, if you've never seen it, is The Rebel Billionaire, Richard Branson TV program about how he worked with a number of people on a competition to identify this. And one of these people went on to be a billionaire out of this, not in the environmental space. But anyway, risk. How can we deal with it? And finally, leadership. Leadership at every level. I think what we need to see, and maybe the university here could start by this, is having bringing together the heads of the different schools, to actually discuss these issues. What does it mean to the university overall in the council? And then take that out. Maybe the Vice-Chancellor then should meet other business school leaders and other Vice-Chancellors as to how is university going to deal with this in the future. So anyway, I'm slightly over. Apologies, Pierre, but thank you very much.
Very quickly, people.